invoice, right? So once we have your pro forma invoice, we know that yes, this individual or this economic operator is ready for importation and therefore is qualified to apply for an advance ruling. Then additionally, you must make the request in writing. Because also I've had the experience where people who, want to make an application for advance ruling, they just make a phone call and they say, I have this product, want to make an advance ruling. Can you give us an advance ruling on this particular item? Can you share the HS code with us? And I tell them, well, you have to go to the advance ruling platform and make a request, an official request. Remember, advance ruling is a legal procedure. It's backed by law and has legal framework. So from the beginning to the end of the whole process, there must be an engagement, like a kind of evidence of contract between the Nigerian Customs Service and the economic operator. From the beginning to the end of the procedure, there must be evidence to show that the economic operator was actually interested in the advance ruling, and that for every step he made his request. We must have that kind of evidence. So if you don't request in writing, the Nigeria Customs Service cannot process or issue an advance ruling. And then when you apply or make an application for the advance ruling, there must be clarity in the application, and there must be provision of sufficient information. Now, some people, when they are applying, they will just write, maybe they want the HS code, or let me say they imported some items disassembled. Let me give an instance, maybe a disassembled machinery, right? And of course, a disassembled machinery has different component parts. Some of them are as basic as the nuts, the bolts, and the screw. And then some of them, let me just say, if it's like a disassembled air conditioner, it could be the compressor, the condenser units, and also, you see, there are different parts. So in making that kind of application for a machinery, the economic operator has to be very specific. You say, I'm applying for, the tariff classification for a disassembled air conditioner, or tariff classification for the compressor of an air conditioner. It must be clear and specific. You can't just say tariff classification, yet the documents that you provide is maybe a disassembled air conditioner, and you write, oh, tariff classification of this product. What product? Is it all the items you want a tariff classification for? Or is it a specific item amongst all the items that you have provided? On the part of the Nigeria Customs Service, we are obligated to promptly treat and issue an advance ruling. Immediately we receive an application for advance ruling, we start work, provided that you have given us clear and sufficient information. Now, advance ruling is legally binding only between the Nigeria Customs Service, and the beneficiary within the provisions of the national legislation, which means that if I provide, or if the service provides an advance ruling for Mr. Kumar, Otumba Pradeep cannot use that advance ruling, except they belong to the same company. I don't know if that's clear. Only Mr. Kumar can use the advance ruling. Mr. Pradeep cannot say, oh, there's this advance ruling on a particular product, I want to apply it also. It's not going to work, because the advance ruling is user specific to a particular person on a particular product for a particular, consignment. So it's very user specific. Now, advance ruling has a validity period. The minimum validity period is 1 year. However, in the Nigeria Customs Service, we have recently developed a regulation which will be published anytime from now, to state that for tariff classification purposes, an advance ruling on HS code will be valid for 5 years. Now, these 5 years reflect the tariff cycle of the Harmonized System Committee. In every year, annually, the Harmonized System Committee, they meet, but they review the Harmonized System codes every 5 years. So the next review cycle is in 2028. Any economic operator that receives an advance ruling within this period, the advance ruling will be valid until December 2027. However, for things like custom valuation, we cannot give a long validity period because custom valuation is usually, how do I put it? Custom valuation is usually subject to to monetary policy, the exchange rates, terms of payments. There's nothing constant about valuation. So it's difficult to say, okay, valuation should be like, should have a validity period of more than 1 year. It can only be within a year, maybe within 12 months, within the year that it was issued. Now to the next, an advance ruling decision can be annulled. What does it mean to annul an advance ruling? It means that it can be suspended if it is found that the economic operator at the point of applying provided wrong information or committed fraudulent information. Immediately, the Nigeria Customs Service discovers that fraud has been, committed or incorrect information, false information was given, that advance ruling will be annulled. However, an annulment can be appealed within the provisions of the law, which means if you feel that we made an error in annulling your advance ruling, because annulments will also come with some legal, because you lied, or sorry, it is assumed that the economic operator gave false information. And if you go to section 241 of the Nigeria Customs Service Act, when you give us false information, we are subject to penalties. It's a legally binding contract. So in as much as the economic operator, right, if he gives false information, is subject to penalty. The economic operator can also sue customs if we don't keep our own end of the agreement, right? If you feel, oh, you issued us an advance ruling, but there are certain things that are going on, you can call us to, you can bring us, is it on notice? You can also query us and say, why didn't you keep your own part of the agreement? Because this is a legally binding contract in line with legal framework. It's an act. The advance ruling is now what we call an act of parliament, because it was decided not by the Nigeria Customs Service, but by the parliament, right? Which is, I think, one of the highest, is it law or decision-making bodies in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So you also have a right to query us. If at any point in time you feel that we have not given or kept to our own end of the agreement, then an advance ruling can be revoked. Revocation of an advance ruling means that there's a change in fiscal policy measure or there's a change in international convention. For example, in Nigeria, we regularly update the fiscal policy measure annually. It used to be an annual event, although it's not, stable. Sometimes it's 1 year, sometimes it's 1 year and 6 months, sometimes it's 8 months. So if there are changes in fiscal policy measure, we have to revoke the advance ruling, right? And revoking the advance ruling is just because of maybe changes in duty rates. Maybe the duty rates, how will I put it, was, let me say, for example, you are importing, is it something, what should I say, maybe antibiotics. I think right now antibiotics without penicillin is 0%. And then suddenly they say, oh, antibiotics with penicillin should pay 5%, rate of duty. That's a change in fiscal policy measure. So we have to revoke that particular advance ruling and make a modification. However, before we can revoke and modify, we have to give a grace period. The law tells us that we must give a grace period before implementing or introducing a new procedure. And in Nigeria, grace period is usually 90 days. So after, provision of grace period, we at the Nigeria Customs Service, to show that we are at par with international best practice, we notified officially the WCO Secretariat on our acceptance on their recommendation to implement advance rulings. So now it is recognized globally that Nigeria, in line with international best practice, is issuing advance ruling programs. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the advantages of advance ruling. If you remember, we said advance ruling covers areas like tariff classification, custom valuation, and rules of origin. And each of these procedures are governed by law or a legal framework. For example, when it comes to tariff classification, we know that the tariff classification is guided by what we call the general interpretative rules, right? And the general interpretative rules, if we look at it, it's, let me just give you a brief overview. In 1988, the contracting parties of the harmonized system, which includes Nigeria, accepted and brought into effect what we now call the harmonized system nomenclature, right? So the harmonized system nomenclature is that book, that tariff book that you see us holding. And this harmonized system nomenclature is what we call an annex to the harmonized system convention, the convention that agreed that, contracting parties all over the world will classify and describe their goods based on the HS codes. So in the annex, they included the harmonized system nomenclature. Now, to understand and to be able to apply HS codes, the harmonized system committee also included what we call the general interpretative rules, right? The general interpretative rules for how do I put it, for classifying goods in the nomenclature. And these general interpretative rules, there are 6 in number. Also in the harmonized system convention, one of the annexes is the legal notes, what we call legal notes in the harmonized system nomenclature, that provide a scope and a limitation, right? Of, okay, when you are classifying goods, for example, you will say section 1 or chapter 1, animals. I'm sure if you've opened your tariff book, you will see where they say this section covers live animals, these, that, it gives you a scope and a limitation of the kind of items that, can be classified in that particular heading. However, not everybody is an expert on the harmonized system, right? Even as custom officers, up until tomorrow, forever, we still are trying to understand the harmonized system nomenclature and the principles that guide interpretation of goods or description of goods in the harmonized system nomenclature. So one of the advantages of advanced ruling for us in customs is that because of the pre-declaration engagements that we have with economic operators, it allows for uniform application and interpretation of the harmonized system. It also allows us to better manage compliance, It's, sorry, it also helps us to manage, compliance, right? And fulfill obligations to facilitate legitimate trade. Because when it comes to compliance management, if you look at the mandate of the Nigeria Customs Service, apart from revenue collection, it's enforcement. We have to enforce fiscal policy measures. We have to enforce international conventions. Like if you look at, we have this Montreal Convention, we have the Rotterdam Convention, we have the Basel Conventions, we have the Stockholm Convention, there are so many conventions, which Nigeria is a part of. We have to ensure implementation. And sometimes the economic operators may not understand the obligations under this convention. But when you apply for an advanced ruling, it gives us time to take you through certain procedures. For example, recently, somebody applied. They wanted to know if, because they are exporters, right? And they export with containers and the pallets. So they wanted to know if we export these products in containers and pallets, when we are bringing this back into Nigeria, are we going to pay duty? But you see, there's already a framework that covers that area. So now, because we're able to issue an advance ruling to him and explain all implications, it helps him to comply, which means that when he's importing his goods back, he understands what is expected of him. He understands the things that if he does it, it will also bring some kind of penalty. So it actually allows customs to better manage compliance and fulfill obligations to facilitate legitimate trade. It also gives us an advanced knowledge of future importations, which are useful for risk management purposes, helps us to prevent revenue leakage through undervaluation or transfer pricing, minimizes or mitigates origin fraud, then promotes a timely release of cargo by reducing tariff classification work at the declaration stage. Let's go to the next slide, please. So for the economic operators, the major advantage of advanced ruling is certainty and predictability. Knowing exactly how much it will cost you to do business through customs or with customs. Because I know we've had this experience, particularly when I was in Tinkan Island, when we were in Tinkan Island Port Command. You know, you see people that will come and complain in the area controller's office that they gave a particular clearing agent this amount of money to clear their goods. For example, he said, oh, maybe the clearing agent said it would cost 800,000 naira to clear a container of a particular item through customs control. And then suddenly, after like 1 week, the custom broker will now tell him, ah, sir, it's 2 million. Oh. Customs say it's 2.5. And you see the guy is destabilized. The importer is actually destabilized because in the first place, the clearing agent wasn't honest. He was just trying to see how he can, make maximum gain. So that uncertainty, we see that it actually destabilizes a lot of importers. So the key objective of advanced ruling program is to provide predictability and certainty to trade when it comes to how customs will treat their goods at the point of importation as it relates to tariff classification, customs, and customs valuation in particular. And then sometimes when it also relates to other fiscal policy measures or custom procedures to reduce the cost it will take, to reduce the time it will take, to reduce any or to mitigate any need for, is it additional payments or excess costs. And of course, finally, our objective is also to promote trust between the economic operator and customs. We don't want to always be having arguments, and sometimes you see that the economic operators will say, oh, customs wants to deal with us. Customs is not fair. Customs is after us. Customs is spoiling our businesses. So we don't want that, because at the end of the day, without the economic operator, without you, we're not going to be here. And our objective is to provide facilitation to improve our services and enhance, the way we do business, our ease of doing business profile. Next slide, please. So these are some conditions under which an advanced ruling cannot be issued to an economic operator. The first is that the applicant has already been issued an advanced ruling on the same product. Once we issue you a HS code, for example, on a bottle of water, you don't have to apply again because the HS code is not going to change. I don't know if you get the HS code on the bottle of water is not going to change. So there's no need to apply for it again because HS code is HS code. I know the only thing that you may want to apply for is maybe advanced ruling on valuation, because of course values are not constant. There might be changes. When it comes to tariff classification in particular, once an advanced ruling is issued on a product, it's okay. And then number two, if there is a dispute resolution or court case regarding the tariff classification of a similar product, we will not issue an advanced ruling immediately. We are going to wait until that dispute has been resolved, so that we don't end up, withdrawing or revoking particular advance ruling. And thirdly, the goods for which an advance ruling, if you apply for an advance ruling and that product is already in Nigeria, or withdraw the application or reject the application. You cannot apply for an advance ruling once your goods are already in Nigeria, or once you've already processed your Form M, your PAR, you are not qualified for an advance ruling. So it's always best to apply when you've not even shipped, pre-shipment. Maybe while you are trying to process your Form M, or even before you process your Form M, because most of the time, the HS code we issue you is the HS code you use to apply for the Form M and process the PAR. And then also, if the applicant does not provide sufficient information, especially when it comes to chemicals or pharmaceutical products, if you don't give us clear MSDS, chemical analysis in particular, what's the profile of these products? What are the ingredients? Because, we are dealing with essential character. If you're not able to provide such information to us, then we'll have to reject it, because an advance ruling must be made based on informed, information, clear information, sufficient information information that helps us to give a legally binding decision beyond reasonable doubt, because that's our obligation. But if the information is not clear, then we can't issue an advance ruling. And then once somebody, an applicant, has been charged with abuse or fraudulent use of a ruling issued by the service, then we may delay or withdraw from issuing an advance ruling to that same individual because he has already abused the procedure and may not be qualified, except maybe a superior, maybe a higher authority intervenes, or the CGC may wish to overlook, that particular abuse. However, except for that condition, then maybe the person is not qualified to receive an advance ruling. Next slide, please. So this is the end for this session. I hope I did. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if I took too much time. Yes.
No, we are almost on time. So I think we should move to the next presentation and we can take all the question at once.
Okay, that'll be okay then.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can now look at the guide, how to make an application for advance ruling. This is not going to take too much time. So we can go to the next slide, please, as guide to completing advance ruling application. So for you to qualify, right, for an advance ruling, the first thing that you have to do is to create an account. Let me see. Mr. Kumar, can you go to the Nigerian Customs Service website? Can we share that kind of screen? I don't know if...
Sure, I can.
Or sorry, can you, or should I try and do that?
Yeah, I can. Just one more.
Okay. So I can show you the step by step. You have to go to the Nigerian Customs Service website. That's customs.gov.ng. That's the first step, to create an account, because you have to create an account with us. So while we are waiting to, go to the website, it's with pleasure that we announce that Nigeria Customs Service, or Nigeria, is actually the... Yes, please, this screen. So we'll go to the e-services. Yes. So now, if you see, you can see authorized AEO. Immediately under AEO, you see advanced ruling. Yes. So you click on the advanced ruling tab. Good. So once you click on the tab, it will lead you to the advanced ruling.nigeriatradehub.gov.ng landing page. So now, of course, you don't have any credentials, so you can't log in. So you have to get registered. So you click on the get registered. Then it will take you to the notification of intent. You apply manually. It's best to apply manually. So you have to click on this item. Please click on apply manually, okay? Although we can't, of course, we can't apply now because you're not ready for any application. But you expect that you input your company name, the TIN number, your address, email address. If you're a custom broker, it's good to put your RC number. Now, this TIN number is actually for the company that you're making applications on their behalf. That's where this TIN number comes in, right? Because if you remember, I said a custom broker cannot apply generally. He must apply for a particular importer. So this is why this company TIN number is there. And then, of course, you click on apply. And as soon as you click on apply, you will receive a notification from us. That notification will, let us know that you have registered for an account. And as soon as we endorse it, you receive your credentials, like your login details. And when you get your login details, please, can you go back to the landing page, Mr. Kumar? Go to the landing page of the website.
Sorry, the same web page?
Yes, it's the same web page. Because when you get to the web page, then you can log in anyway with your credentials, right? So we're waiting for Mr. Kumar. So just go back, click on the back arrow. You can click on the back arrow again. Oh, okay, sorry, please can you click on the advanced ruling? No, it's yeah. Okay, go to the home page. Here. Okay, sorry. You can't go back. Yeah. So now when you've gotten registered, your credentials are with you, you can now log in, click on the login, please. Log in, yeah. Just before log in on the right. So you log in, you input your TIN number, the password that we sent to you, and then you can start the process of, making the application. So as soon as you log in, Mr. Kuma, please, can we go to the presentation slide?
Sure.
Thank you. So as soon as we log in, please can we go to the slide before this? Yes. So this is the login page. This is what is going to open up as soon as you log in. So you click on My Application. So the next slide, please. Then click on My Application. So the My Application, when you click on it, this is what you'll see. This is the template, right? The interface that will be open to you. Then you click on New Application. As soon as you click on New Application, there's going to be a drop-down box that you'll see. So now this drop-down box, you can see classification. If you are trying to apply for HS code, you see the evaluation if you're interested in evaluation. You see origin if you're interested in knowing an origin, determining criteria for a preferential trade agreement. And then you see others. So you can only select one application at a time. You can't make multiple applications in the same time. It has to be one at a time. So the next slide, please. So now when you click on the application, for example, HS code, this is also the interface that you'll see. After you've filled all the necessary boxes, right? You've selected the item. Remember that we said it's good to provide clear information. Now, if you're applying for tariff classification, it's important to write, you're applying for tariff classification. You describe the product, and the description should match what is on your pro forma invoice and what is on your MSDS or your chemical analysis, certificates. It should match. There should be, what they call it, uniformity in your documentation. If you're applying for a mobile phone, the name of the mobile phone should be the same across board. It shouldn't be different information. And then after you have filled all the necessary boxes and uploaded all the supporting documents where necessary, you now click on the declaration form. You see, I declare that all information and statements on this form and any attached document is true, according to my knowledge and belief. So you have to click on this declaration before you can go to the next, level. Next slide, please. So now, if you have any supporting documents, you have to upload them. Our system can only accept PDF. It doesn't accept JPEG, JPG, it can only accept PDF documents. So you choose file from your computer, from your desktop, and then you click on the upload. Now, after you've clicked on the upload, you submit final. However, if you're submitting more than one document, when you click on the upload, you update until you are done with, uploading all the documents that you want to upload. Then you click on the submit final documents. The next slide, please. Oh, I think that's all. So once you've uploaded all your documents, all that's is required for you to do is to wait. Or most of the time, we also like to engage. We like it when you call because our obligation or part of our procedure is to engage with the economic operator. We want to know, the details, exact details of what your application is about. It also gives you the opportunity to ask us relevant questions. Somebody was asking about the time, I think I saw in the chat box, somebody was saying, what's time? How long does it take to process an advanced ruling? The maximum so far is when all the documents are complete, 5 days. within 5 working days, an advanced ruling is ready. The only reason for delay is when we are, going back and forth, asking for supporting documents, asking you to reapply, that your application was not clear. We're just trying to, if the information is not sufficient and clear, then naturally, we won't be able to process within 5 days. But so far, our processing time is 5 working days. So that's it for this particular presentation. And I think for this particular, I think it's time for us to ask questions anyway. You can ask me all the questions that you've been chatting or writing in the chat box.
Yeah, I think let it be on the chat box for now. And before we go for the Q&A session, I think let me start with Mr. Taran. So thank
Okay.
you, Madam, for this enlightening presentation, and we are incredibly grateful for this particular session. So
Thank you
I
very
think
much.
let me invite Mr. Taran to come forward and give us his own presentations before we can take the Q&A sessions.
Thank you very much.
Let me open the slides for you. Is my screen visible?
Okay, please, can you unmute Engineer Terang?
Sure.
He's muted.
Is the presentation showing on the screen, please?
Let me try. Hello, good morning, participants.
Good morning, sir.
Let me first start by thanking my co-presenter, Laureta, for a wonderful presentation. In fact, she really did justice to the topic she just handled. It was indeed wonderful, and I believe that the participant has really gained a lot from it. Let me also thank Mr. Kailash, Mr. Kumar, and all other people that supported to organize this particular workshop. It is a very good opportunity for all of us to engage and share knowledge on areas of interest. Without wasting much of our time, let me start my presentation, and I will start with import procedure and documentation requirement. So basically, my presentation is going to cover introduction and the legal framework. We will look at briefly look at import documentation. We will look at the procedure, import procedure before importation of goods, then procedure to be followed during the importation and after the arrival of goods. Then we will look at the generalized import procedure. Then we conclude on this particular topic and possibly move to evaluation. Next slide, please. All right, you may all agree with me that the most important thing in the customs declaration and what actually enable us or aid us all or economic operators to facilitate trade is basically adhering to regulations. And adhering to the regulations when it comes to import transactions starts with proper documentation. Proper documentation is key to all aspects of customs transaction from the beginning of importation until you receive your stuffs in your warehouses. So we must always comply with regulations so that we can be able to facilitate our transactions to be able to cut costs of doing our businesses. So the stakeholders that we know engage in the import transactions. Basically, when you have to do importation, those that you will engage with, and Nigeria Customs Service, we know the Central Bank of Nigeria and their roles, the commercial banks. We know it depends on what you are importing. We have the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control. We have Standard Organization of Nigeria that determine the standard of goods for importation. We have the Nigerian Environmental Standard Regulatory and Enforcement Agency, especially when it comes to importation of used products, shipping companies, terminal operators, importers, and agents, among others. So when it comes to documentation and import procedure, the legal provision in that regard is the Nigeria Customs Service Act. We have section 30 to 45 that talks about customs control. Customs control, any control that customs will fulfill from the importation until the exit of goods from the customs control. Then we have a provision that has to do with importation, exportation. Generally, that is section 46 to section 66. And we have, in particular, 51 and 52 that talking about provision of information that has to do with the documentation required. And most importantly, the import guideline and documentation requirement under the destination inspection scheme. It gives step-by-step requirements for importation from the pre-importation stage to the final release of goods from customs control. Next slide, please. We will review the import documentation requirements, which I believe most of us are aware of. Basically, before we start any importation, as an importer, as an authorized, as an economic operator, as soon as you've made your decision to import, first you are supposed to contact your overseas supplier, who will provide you with a pro forma invoice based on the item you want and the quantity of the items you want and the state of the items you want. It will specify the costs of those items. Then after, with your pro forma invoice, you're supposed to approach your bank and process your E-Form M. As soon as you have your E-Form M, we will go through the process of approval of E-Form M later. We are just briefly going to mention the import documentation here. Then you have your bill of lading. As soon as your consignment is ready and is on board, is on board the ship, on board the vessel, on board the aircraft or the truck, you have your certificate of value. That's the document that determines the nationality or the origin of your consignment. Or you have the combined certificate of value and origin. The combined certificate of value and origin will have information that are on the invoice and also information that are on the certificate of origin. We have the packing list that lists all the items on board the vessel for that particular importation. You have the manufacturer certificate. That's a certificate issued by the manufacturers of product. You have your insurance certificate, regulatory certificates such as the SUNCAP for standard of to determine the standard or to say if the item you are importing is of the required standard. You have NAFDAC certificate for items that require NAFDAC certification, NESRIA certificate for items that require NESRIA certification. Then you need import permit. It's not all items will require import permit. For example, if you're in the pharmaceutical industry and you want to import, for example, tramadol, you know that you need import permit because it is highly regulated in Nigeria. Then the last but not the least, you need the pre-arrival assessment report. That is the document that you will obtain from, it's a risk management or risk assessment document that you obtain from customs that will tell you your value, the likely HS code you will use for your declaration. And these are all the items you require before you now submit your declaration to customs. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide, we are talking of procedure before importation of goods. before importation of goods, there are procedures to follow. Okay, and these procedures must be followed, and there are also stakeholders that have their specific role. At the pre-importation stage, we have the role of the importer, the role of the authorized dealer bank, and the role of the customs. The role of the importer, of course, one of his roles is to interface with the exporter, to make his intention to the exporter that this is what he wants to import. So the importer ensure that the supplier provide the pro forma invoice. That is always the first document. As soon as he receives the documents from the supplier, he ensure that all the documents are forwarded to authorized dealer bank. If your authorized dealer bank, for example, is First Bank, that's the bank you are dealing with, make sure that all those documents are submitted to the First Bank. Then the next, you complete your E-Form M application. Okay, when you complete your E-Form M application, then your authorized dealer bank will now, after carrying out due diligence, of course, you must have had the relationship with your authorized dealer bank, and they know exactly who they are dealing with. When they now verify your application, they will now forward it to NCS, to Nigeria Customs Service. As soon as Nigeria Customs Service receives application for a transaction from the authorized dealer bank, Nigeria Customs Service will check all the attached document. The attached document in this case will be the pro forma invoice, the Form M application itself, and other regulatory certificates. It depends on the item of import, maybe NAFDAC certificate, NESRIA, or whatever. If all the documents are okay, Nigeria Customs Service will accept the Form M and register it. It will now become a registered Form M, a registered Form M. And if for any reason there is issue with any of the attached document or the Form M itself, Nigeria Customs Service will reject the Form M, and the bank will receive notification of such rejection. It is expected that the bank will carry out necessary amendment or reconcile the documents, because Nigeria Customs Service will point out the issue that they identified. So the bank, together with the importer, will now reconcile and rectify the issue and send the Form M back to Nigeria Customs Service for final approval. When the Form M is ready, it is expected that the pre-importation stage has been concluded. The next slide, please. Then the next is what happened during the importation stage. And even after arrival of goods, when the goods must have arrived Nigerian port. There are so many stakeholders engaged here. We have the Nigeria Customs Service. We have the authorized dealer bank, that is your designated bank. We have the role of the importer, the supplier, and we have the shipping company. First, we expect that the shipping company will ensure that all goods being consigned for shipment are covered by appropriate Form M. Of course, the shipping company will, on the transport documents, will write the Form M number. Before now, at the pre-shipment stage, you have already registered Form M. So we have Form M number, which you will give to your supplier, which will reflect on the bill of lading. Then as soon as the consignment is on board and it is being shipped to Nigeria, the shipping line must send the advanced electronic manifest to Nigeria Customs Service electronically at least 24 hours, minimum of 24 hours before the arrival of goods in Nigeria. Then the next thing is that your supplier will make available the set of the combined certificate of value and origin, the transport documents, that's the bill of lading or the airway bill, the packing list, that's the list of all items in that particular consignment, and forward all of these documents to the importer or send it directly to the authorized dealer bank. The authorized dealer bank will in turn forward all these documents to Nigeria Customs Service. And these documents, apart from at the pre-entry stage where we process the Form M, all these documents, the CCVO, parking list, the bill of lading, and the final invoice, all of them are considered as final documents because they are considered as final documents to be received for the purpose of shipment. And as soon as Nigeria Customs Service received these final documents, it will go through the final documents, check if all the documents are okay, do risk assessment of all the documents, and if the documents are okay, it will proceed to issue what we call pre-arrival assessment report, which is an advisory risk assessment document. And if there is issue with any of the documents, Nigeria Customs Service will inform the bank. And as soon as banks receive information from Nigeria Customs Service alert on rejection, it is expected that it will rectify any anomaly in the documentation and send it back to Nigeria Customs Service for issuance of PAN. But if the documents received from the bank are all in order, then Nigeria Customs Service will issue the PAN within 6 hours. That's a PAN advisory document, which will now be used to make declaration, which is declaration is like telling customs that this is the item I've imported, this is the classification of the item from the importer side, this is the value of the item, this is the origin of this particular item, and make assessment, and now submit, and after that, go to the bank and make payment. We will do that one in detail in the next slide, please. The next slide is the generalized import procedure. Okay, we have the pre-arrival procedure. Because of time, I will not discuss the pre-arrival procedure because we have already discussed it. Then after the pre-arrival procedure, then go back, please. Then we have the clearance procedure. It is expected that we have finished pre-arrival procedure at this stage. We have finished all our documentation. We have submitted all the documents to all the stakeholders. We have gotten our PAN. So at the clearance procedure, what we do is the importer will, through his representative or his agent or declarant, make a self-assessment at what we call the trader zone. He will now capture declaration in the form, in what we call the single goods declaration form. There he will declare the item, the quantity of the item, the value of the item, the HS code, the origin of the item, the quantity of the item. As soon as all this declaration has been made, then the next thing, the declarant or the agent of the importer will do what we call self-assessment. After capturing all this data, it's expected that he will go through the data and make sure that everything imported, everything that is imputed into the system are correct. And if they are correct and he's satisfied, he will now do assessment. As soon as the assessment is done, then the duty payable will be made known. Then the next is for the declarant to go to the bank and pay duty based on the assessment made. After payment of duty, automatically the system will trigger selectivity based on our risk management system. It will trigger selectivity. The selectivity will now assign the declaration to our selectivity lines. It can trigger it to red, orange, yellow, blue, or green. If a declaration is triggered to green, it means that such declaration has no issue at all and require no physical examination and is automatically released. We have cases like that, especially the recently introduced authorized economic operator security, which is a trade facilitation tool that allow compliant traders that we note that is after validation process, their system, their partners, and any other person dealing with them from the point of supply until the consignment gets into the warehouse. All of them are known to be compliant, including the agent and everybody. If an authorized operator feels he is a compliant trader and he feels that all the people doing business with him are compliant, then he is free to apply for the authorized economic operator security. And if he go through all the validation process and is successful, then he will have this benefit of automatic release after declaration and payment of duty. And that means the person will be a beneficiary of authorized economic operator security. The next is blue, which we call fast track. As soon as a declaration is made and is selected to blue, it is expected that the person is a fast track beneficiary also. And another name for it is authorized economic operator simplified. That is, the procedure has been simplified for the person. And what is it expected for the person is to go through documentary check at the CPC. They will just check the documents. And as soon as then they will do what we call provisional release. Automatically, the trader or his agent will carry the consignment directly to the warehouse or the premises of the importer. There, custom officers will conduct examination. They may just pick some of the containers there and conduct examination on the premises of the importer. And after that, they will input their inspection act. So these two risk management lane are basically for traders that has compliance history. Then the next, we have the yellow. The yellow lane calls for documentary check. It means our system has realized the need to check the documents for that in respect of that particular transaction. And after going through the documents at the CPC, that's the Customs Processing Center, and if the officers there are satisfied that the documents are okay, and that particular item may be qualified for automatic release, then it will be manually triggered to the green lane for automatic release. And if after that, the item or that particular transaction is considered for any other lane, like to go to red lane for physical examination or to orange lane for scanning, then it would be manually routed to those selectivity lanes. The next is the orange. The orange is the scanning. If a declaration is selected orange, it means it will go through scanning process. The container will pass through a scanner and image of the container will be saved inside our system. And the image analyst will analyze the image and write a report of his or her observation. Then the other one is red. I will discuss red before I continue with the orange, because these are just process of examination, okay? But after the examination, they will all go through the same process. The red calls for 100% physical examination. It means that the container must be dropped, opened, and offloaded to see the content physically. Then after the physical examination or scanning, if the declaration conforms with the contents of the container, for example, then the Inspection Act will be imputed. What is Inspection Act? Is the result of the examination. They will type into the system, this container or the items were examined by so and found to contain this. Then release hereby authorized. That means if there's no issue found, automatically after the examination, they will release it. But if there is issue, if there is any abnormality or discrepancy found during examination, then it will also reflect in the Inspection Act. That is the report of examination, and they will point out the issue. As soon as the issue is pointed, that means there is a need to review the assessment, and it will go to a seat that we call query and amendment, or it will go to the evaluation. It depends on the issue observed. And there at the query and amendment, if this documentary issue that need to be rectified, they will rectify it. If it calls for reclassification, they will do. If this at the evaluation, it calls for revaluation, they will do. And a DN may be issued. It depends on the identified infraction. And if a demand issue is issued, that means there's a need to pay additional duty. Then the agent of the importer will go back to the bank, pay additional duty. And as soon as the duty is paid, it will trigger another selectivity. It will leave the query lane. That is the maroon. It will now leave the query lane because they have finished the query process. And it will go back to the examiner. That is the person we call the releasing officer. And the releasing officer will confirm payment and release the consignment. So that is the longest process. And that is why we call for compliance, compliance with guidelines and regulations, so that we don't need to go through this long process of query. As soon as goods are released from customs control, the next thing is expected that the agent will now go to the terminal operators, okay, and collect exit note, then take the container, pass through gate, and collect gate pass, and then that is the end of the clearance process. The next is for the goods to be taken to the premises or the warehouse of the goods owner. So that is the generalized import clearance procedure. Next. In conclusion, we can say that the import documentation requirement in Nigeria involves around a series of mandatory forms and certificates, which we have mentioned, and reports, just like the pre-arrival assessment report, that ensures transparency and regulatory compliance. Importers must ensure they have all necessary documents. Of course, without this document, it will bring about delay, and process of facilitating trade will be hampered. And the essence of having everything in order and ensuring that regulations are followed is to facilitate trade and to ensure smooth clearance of goods through the Nigerian port. And of course, when there is no delay, there are no fines, no seizures. If there's compliance, no fines, no seizures, and cost of doing business will be reduced. I think that's the end of, we have come to the end of the first part of this presentation, which is the documentation and import procedure. Thank you. Then I think due to time constraint, we may just start the next, which is the concept of customs valuation. Thank you. Under the concept of customs valuation, okay, I don't think we need to go through the scope because of time. Let's just go to the next slide. What is customs valuation? When we talk of customs valuation, basically, this is the process of determining value of imported goods. Valuation itself is a process, while the custom value is the value to be determined. That is the worth of a particular consignment, or the value to be determined for the purpose of determining ad valorem duty. What is an ad valorem duty? An ad valorem duty is a duty that is based on percentage of the value of item. The percentage of the value of item. A 5% item has ad valorem duty of 5%. A 20% duty item has ad valorem duty of 20%. So the custom value, which we say is the value for the determination, value to be determined for ad valorem duty. It is there for what? It is the tax base for duty collection and other taxes. Of course, in customs, we are mostly used to the ad valorem duty, but there are also times we charge specific duty, like when it comes to excise duty. Or for example, if you are bringing energy drink, or you are bringing energy drink, or some other sort of drinks that are allowed for importation, you pay the duty, 20% duty, then you now go and pay maybe 10%, 10 naira per liter. That one is what we call specific duty. That specific duty is not based on the value, but is based on the unit or quantity of the item you are bringing. And when you have a situation where you pay, like we talk of energy drink or health drink, where you pay the ad valorem duty and the specific duty all together, then we have what we call composite duty. That is 2 in 1. Next slide, please. We have the legal framework for customs valuation. Okay. First, we look at the WCO guideline. The WCO guideline under the revised Kyoto Convention, standard 9.9 in particular, calls for the establishment and utilization of valuation database as a risk management tool to guide customs officers in the course of their valuation work. We have the GATT agreement, Article 7 specifically, which mention of transaction value, the real value paid or payable for an item as the basis for customs valuation. We have the World Trade Organization Agreement on Customs Valuation, 1994, that came into effect on the 1st of January, 1995. It came with some articles, about 24 articles. 17 of them specifically talks about determination of value. We have the ECOWAS set that also spoke about the articles from Article 1 to 17. Then we have the Nigeria Customs Service Act, Nigeria Customs Service Act from Chapter 67, which talks about determination of value by the importer. 68 that talks about the determination of value by customs. And the other subsequent sections that spoke about the different method of valuation. This collectively form the legal framework for customs valuation. Next slide, please. Then, why do we even have rules on valuation? Why? Of course, one of the rules is because we want a positive system. Before the rules and before the Article 7 of GATT of 1947, before the WTO agreement, and the customs valuation database, there was what we call the notional concept of value. The notional concept of value was looking at value for custom purpose based on the price in an open market. Later, it was found that it wasn't that looking at the price of goods in open market is not really appropriate. And so there was need to look at positive system, the positive concept of value, which now start looking at the transaction value. So that is one of the reasons we have rules. It's a positive system. The other reason is it is intended to be fair, such that if a value is given to trader A or an operator A, then the same value should also be given to an operator B, so that the whole system of valuation is fair. Then the other thing is greater uniformity. Greater uniformity means it's not just about fairness, such that the method of valuation used in Nigeria should also be the one used in other countries to determine the value. Next is certainty and predictability. Of course, if we know that these are the method of valuation, the operator know, the customs know, and any other stakeholder knows that this is the method of valuation. Of course, ahead of time, in advance, we can be able to predict how our transactions will look like with certainty. Then the next reason is to eliminate arbitrarity. Arbitrary and fictitious values are not allowed in customs valuation. So that is why there are rules and standards, such that these rules have to be followed in determining the value of item, such that arbitrariness and fictitious values are not allowed at all. Then the next is revenue collection purpose. For revenue collection purpose, the value of item must always be determined because it serves as the revenue or the tax base for collection of duty. So basically, these are the rules for customs valuation. Next slide, please. Now we are here. Method of valuation. Method of valuation. And the method of valuation are the most important things in valuation because these are the methods that are used to determine value for customs purposes. Okay? And basically, we have 6 methods of valuation. And we will go through each of these methods. Under the 6 methods of valuation, we have first is the transaction value, which based on the Article 7 of GATT and Article 1 of the WTO Agreement on Customs Valuation. It says that the transaction value should be the value for customs purpose. Transaction value should be the value for customs purpose. But that transaction value has adjustments. There are some things that need to be there, and there are some things that ordinarily should not be there, which we call them allowable and non-allowable discounts. And those adjustments are provided for in the Article 8 of the WTO Valuation Agreement. What is the transaction value? The transaction value is the amount paid or payable for that particular item of import. The real amount paid or payable at the time of importation. As just said, in line with Article 8 of the WTO Valuation Agreement. So as soon as the transaction value submitted by the importer is accepted by customs, there's no reason for rejection, then it stands as the value for customs purpose. Then the next is transaction value of identical goods. We will still go back to the transaction value when we are explaining adjustment. Okay, but when do we use transaction value of identical goods? We use transaction value of identical goods if we have any reason, substantial reason, not to accept the transaction value as provided by the trader in his invoice. If we have reason to doubt the authenticity of the declared value, then we will now look at the transaction value of identical goods. What are identical goods? Identical goods are goods that are considered identical in all aspects with the declared item, from the same country of export, produced by the same manufacturer, at the same commercial level. That means the level of sale. And at the same comparable quantity with the item being declared. If they are the same thing in all aspects, then such transaction value of identical goods can be used for valuation purpose for the item at issue, for the item being declared. And where do we find this value of identical goods. That is where the issue of valuation database comes in, as envisaged by WCO, on the need for countries to have national valuation database. Then the next, if we cannot find, because this valuation process must follow hierarchical order, and if we cannot find the value of identical goods, then we find the value of similar goods. What are similar goods? Similar goods are also items that are similar in all aspects. They are similar. These are items that can be commercially interchangeable. You can interchange one for another. If you go to market, if you cannot find this, you can still buy this. Or the components are interchangeable. The components of this can be interchanged for the component of the other. They must not be on the same commercial level or the same quantity, or both at the same quantity. We can make adjustments of quantity. If this person bought 1,000 and the one we have is someone that bought 100, we can make adjustment with the quantity. So that is similarity. That is for similar goods. And these three methods of transaction value of identical goods, and transaction value of similar goods, they are the primary method of valuation, and they are referred as transaction value methods, all of them, because you can see transaction value, transaction value, transaction value. Then the next are the secondary method of valuation. What are the secondary method of valuation? We have the deductive value method. The deductive value method, we arrive at the value there by looking at the open market price of the same item in an open market in the country of importation, here in Nigeria, for example. So when we get the value of such item, we have to look at the value that they are selling that item at the largest aggregate quantity, not the value they are selling 1 or 2, at the largest aggregate quantity. Then we now make deductions. We deduct the margin or the profit. Okay, we deduct the inland transportation. We deduct cost of storage. We deduct cost of duty payment and other logistics and any other costs incurred while in the country of importation. After all these deductions, then the value we arrive at finally, that is the value of the item using the deductive method of valuation. The other is the computed value. The computed value, we arrive at computed value by calculating the cost of production, cost of design, cost of packaging, cost of raw material, all put together to produce that particular item. That is the computed value. And this computed value are normally calculated from the country of export. Then the next is what we call the residual value of the fallback value. If all the 5 methods cannot help us to determine the value, we have to now look at the residual or fallback method. And the residual or the fallback method did not really specify exactly which method to follow, but it expects us to use what we call reasonable means. Reasonable means that is considered fair and accepted to both parties. That is the fallback method in summary. But it's expected that in most cases, we don't resort to the fallback method. We are able to determine value using these 5 methods. Though we said this method will be followed sequentially, but the WTO agreement on customs valuation, we said the Article 1 spoke of transaction value. Article 2 spoke about transaction value of identical item. Article 3 spoke about the transaction value of similar. Article 4 gave the importer or the trader the option to consider computed method at his own request instead of doing the deductive method, which is 4. For it to jump to method 5 at the request of the trader instead of following method 4. Then the next Article now 5 is deductive. Article 6 now talking about computed. Article 7 talking about the residual or the fallback method. Article 7. Then Article 8 talks about adjustment. Next slide, please.
Sir, due to the time, I'm sorry for interrupting. I know this is a very important session. And valuation itself is a course of like almost 2 days. And we are trying to cover up in like short period of 15 minutes or 30 minutes. It cannot be full, but you can just give the quick overview so we can go to the Q&A session in respect to.
Okay, let me try to round up maybe in the next 3 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you. So what are these adjustments? Since we can look at them, okay? This adjustment are adjustment to the transaction value. If a transaction value is accepted, we now look at this include to see, is it from the transaction value? Are these things included in the value? Do not include. And if these things are included in the transaction value, then they should be taken out. That is, do not include. Then these options, you know, in Nigeria, we have what we call the CIF value as the tax base. Okay. In other countries, they don't use freight, they don't use insurance, they just use cost. Okay, that is why it is optional. Then the typical discount, these are discount. This type of discount are discounts that are considered freely available to everybody. Discounts that are freely available are allowable discount. They are allowed for anybody to enjoy. The discounts that are not allowed is discounts that are not freely available or discount affected by relationship. Even if there is a relationship between the supplier or the exporter and importer, if the relationship did not affect the price, if such transaction has taken place at arm's length, then it is still accepted. Values declared are still acceptable. Next slide, please. Okay, we can still go through this and just see, these are some of the reasons for rejection of value. Like when there is no sale, you know, there are times we import things without necessarily buying those items. Okay, these are some other conditions, we can look at them. And these are, if any of this condition is there, then the transaction value presented by the importer may be rejected. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we are talking of identical and similar. What's identical here and what is similar? Color does not change, don't stop items from being identical. So we can consider the one on the left as identical. And of course, we can consider this one as similar because they are not by the same producer, though this produced in China, they are the same size, you know, but they are considered as commercially interchangeable. If you go for this, if you cannot get it, you can as well get this because they are non-good brands. You know, next slide, please. Okay, the next, we may not discuss this one much, you know, it's still advanced ruling on valuation, which Madam Lauretta has discussed that with us. So basically, these are the process. If you apply for advanced ruling on valuation, these are the things as customs we are expected to check and confirm, you know, if the transaction value is okay, you know, which method of valuation is applied, royalties and other things, if they are included in the value, if there is proceed to seller, if you are buying something from abroad, and when you sell that thing in Nigeria, it's expected that you will carry something from the amount you receive from selling that thing in Nigeria and send it back to the exporter. That is proceed from the resale of the product. Such proceed should be part of the value. Related party transaction, fine. It doesn't matter. But the most important thing is that does the relationship affect the value? Did it affect the price? Determination of assist. If you render assistance in production, like you are importing something and maybe you give the design, engineering design, or you give the mold or whatever, the value of that engineering design must be added to the value. Effect of transfer pricing, related party. You know, Coca-Cola America is importing to Coca-Cola Nigeria. You know, the related party transaction. We must make sure that that transaction, it takes place at arm's length. Okay, then we now make adjustment to the transaction value where necessary. And before we now give our advanced valuation ruling. Next slide, please. Okay, we are talking of the articles, W2 articles, agreement on customs valuation. Article 716 gives power to the importer, you know, to request for explanation from customs if there is any issue on value. Article 17 also gives customs rights, you know, to satisfy themselves with declared value or value presented by the importer. And I think with this, we've come to the end of this particular presentation. Due to lack of time, we have just maybe 6 minutes, and we'll use it for question and answers. Thank you. Sorry, I am having an issue here. I'm not hearing him.
Okay, Mr. Kumar, we can't hear.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank Madam Loretta and Engineer Tarang for this enlightening presentation and giving us the insight about the entire process. Because of the lack of time today, it's a 2-hour session. So what we did, we only focus on the advanced ruling part of it. HS code classification, it's a 2-day program and a rigorous program, as well as the valuation is also 2 days program, and 1 day is rule of origin. So maybe we'll take all this program some other time. So sticking to the advanced ruling, we have certain questions today from our participants, which they have posted in the group. So before, let me take up the question one by one. The first one is related to the good valuation and container size. Someone has mentioned that it has been noted that the Nigerian Customs Service often calculated duty based on the container size, that is 40 feet or 20 feet container, rather than the actual value of the goods inside. Can you clarify the rationale behind this method? And are there any ongoing effort to revise this approach to affect the true value of the goods? So maybe this question can go directly to Engineer Tarang.
Yes, thank you for that question. And of course, it has been a concern of virtually everybody and so many stakeholders. The reality is that you know how our systems are, and you know practiced by most of our traders outside there, and you know how people are resistant to paying duty and taxes all over the world. So everyone will try as much as possible to pay the little that they can pay, and custom being handicapped sometimes, and because of the volume of trade and the fact that we are sometimes lack of even equipment to really conduct this examination thoroughly, you know, sometimes we are handicapped. And so we try as much as possible to also make sure that people pay for what they import. So I think there are instances where custom will doubt the authenticity of documents. Okay, custom will doubt the compliance level of some transactions. And in that case, custom may be compelled to increase the value in line with the information available to customs, or what customs feel based on our risk assessment may be the content of the container. But at any point in time, if any trader is not satisfied with decision of the customs, the trader is at will allowed to request for a review and present document to customs, and also tell customs why that thing should be reviewed, and even make reference to the method of valuation and the need not to they need to follow the method of valuation, since arbitrarily or fictitious value is not allowed in customs valuation. Thank you.
Okay, and also to support or to add to what Engineer Tarang has said, you know, this particular decision to peg value on container size, I happened to be in one of the meetings that brought these procedures to bear. And like my colleague earlier said, it's all about compliance. You understand, right? Compliance. A lot of the time, we can't depend on transaction value as presented by the importer. And I think one of the objectives of using container size is that no matter what, your transaction value should not be less than freight. The freight of a 20-footer or the freight of a 40-footer carrying specific, commodities, let's say supermarket items, cannot be below a particular value. But at the end of the day, like my colleague has just said, it's all about compliance. Is your transaction value reliable? Most of the time, you look at the invoices presented by the, importer or the broker. They are not the actual transaction value. I mean, some of you know that these values are not original. The invoices are not original. They are not. And first and foremost, Nigeria Customs Service is a law enforcement agency. I mean, you have to get used to that fact. We're not just people that calculate duties and taxes. We also enforce the law. So if you bring to us invoices that do not even appear in any way authentic, then by virtue of Section 77 of the Nigeria Customs Service, we retain the right to investigate value claims and then to determine a fallback method of calculating, the value of goods for the purpose of charging, taxes and other duties. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for this clarification. The next question is related to the HS code classification pre-import. Can importers obtain an HS code classification for their product prior to the importation and include in Form M to avoid discrepancies later? What is the best process to ensure accuracy in classification?
Thank you for the question again. If you remember, we say advanced ruling. Of course, you should apply before you process for your Form M. Again, because one uniformity in the application, in your documentation. Before you process your Form M, please apply for an advanced ruling. This is the international best practice and the standard procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is related to the NESRIA certificate. Someone needs some clarification. Could you provide a detailed explanation of which item require NESRIA certificate?
Peter, you want to answer?
Yes.
Can you see?
Engineer, please unmute yourself.
Okay, try on mute.
Yes, just like the name implies, NESRIA is Nigerian Environmental Standard Regulatory and Enforcement Agency. So it's an agency that is saddled with the responsibility of regulating environmental standard and also enforcing it in Nigeria. So any item that may be considered harmful to the environment, any item of import that may be considered harmful to the environment will require NESRIA certification. Like I gave example, like use electronics, for example. Okay, because by the time you bring in use electronics and maybe at the end of the day you dump them, they will definitely affect our environment. We have so many conventions, items under the Basel Convention, Stockholm Convention, and Montreal. These are items that may have effect on our environment, and so any importation of such item will require NESRIA certificate. Thank you.
The next question is fast track permit versus advanced ruling documentation. Can you highlight the key differences between the importing through fast track permits and bringing through the advanced ruling? What is the benefit and challenges on each process?
So thank you for that question. So we also like to clarify that now the Nigeria Customs Service has moved beyond the fast track regime, and we now practice what we call the Authorized Economic Operator Program. So fast track is now an outdated procedure. But of course, if you want more information on the AEO, we have to organize another workshop because that's another whole procedure.
Yeah.
So the Authorized Economic Operator, like my colleague had earlier mentioned, is about simplifying a clearance process based on an economic operator's compliance, recognized compliance level. It means you qualify to be on the blue lane. So as soon as your goods arrive, you don't have to be at the seaports, and then queue. Physical inspection is based on, the time that you apply to the, what they call them, the terminal operators, to position your container. So there's a queuing process, right? But if you are an AEO beneficiary, you are a blue lane passport holder, let's just say that.
So now you're
Sorry, ma'am. I think can you unmute, please?
Okay, yeah. So I don't know. Okay, so if you are an AEO beneficiary, right? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Can you?
I can hear you.
Okay, so if you're an AEO beneficiary, you have the privilege of going directly to your warehouse and inviting customs to do inspection in your warehouse. You don't have to queue in the seaport or at the port of, delivery. You have the privilege of, is it, what do you call it, exit to the owner's premises. However, an AEO beneficiary or as an AEO beneficiary, it doesn't mean that you're not subject to the customs procedures of, compliance to the tariff classification, compliance to fiscal policy measures, compliance to customs valuation, and other regulatory, compliance or regulations. So this is what AEO is about minimizing the, having the privilege to exit as soon as your goods arrive and inspection is conducted at the owner's premises. Now, advanced ruling is a program that, allows an economic operator to know the tariff classification, the customs valuation of their goods, or let me say in summary, to know the total duty that may be payable on an imported item before it arrives into Nigeria. It allows you to calculate, this is how much exactly I will use to clear these goods. But it's not AEO. The only thing it means is that if there is a fiscal inspection, nobody will, there will be no dispute on your HS code. After fiscal inspection, if the customs area controller or the chief examiner feels that they doubt the tariff classification, there is nothing that they can do about it because there's an advance ruling already issued on that HS code. They can only maybe write a report or consult and say, oh, we feel that HS code wasn't right, but they cannot stop the release of your consignment. AEO is expedited clearance, this expedited exit from the ports, but inspection will still be conducted at the owner's premises. And if your tariff classification is not right, you'll be made to pay additional duties. So it's about the release from the ports. That's what AEO is about. Easy release from the ports, but not release from the customs clearance procedure. I don't know if it's clear. I don't know if the explanation is clear, but advanced ruling talks about, the exact, enables you to understand the total costs of clearing through customs. Both of them are trade facilitation tools, but even if you have AEO, you still need advanced ruling, right? And then sometimes people that, also have advanced ruling may patronize AEO. So you see, they somehow are dependent on each other, but they deal with different aspects of clearance procedure. Thank you.
Sure.
I don't know, do you have anything?
AEO meaning is authorized economic operator. Okay,
Yes.
great. I have one question from my side. If an importer disagree with an advance ruling issued by the Nigerian Customs Service, what is the formal process for appeal and what steps can be taken to expedite the review?
Okay, sorry. So if you want to make an appeal,
for example, if an importer, or let's say me, I disagree with an advance ruling issued by your office,
yeah.
and what is the formal process to reappeal and what steps can be taken to expedite the review?
Okay, so generally, when we are developing the advanced ruling, right, there's a high level of engagement. That's one. We make sure that we carry you along every step. Even sometimes, if we feel that maybe the advanced ruling decision, because once an advanced ruling is issued, it's uploaded on the database, and of course, the importer's name may be visible to people that have access to the database. So, sometimes before we proceed to the final stage, we want to make sure we're on the same page, right? We want to let you know, look, this is our technical decision. And this is, based on the rules, the legal framework that guide, whether it's tariff classification or customs valuation. This may not favor you. And if we should publish it, it's visible to all. So there's a high level of engagement. Before we publish an advanced ruling, there's a high level of engagement. So there is really, or there may not be any need to appeal at that level, right? But however, if you choose to appeal, it's still the same procedure. Either you write to the departments, the DCG tariff and trade, as usual, or write to the Comptroller General, you attention the DCG tariff and trade, that you want a review of the tariff decision on a particular product for which an advance ruling had been issued earlier. But when it comes to tariff classification or when it comes to advance ruling, we actually respect informal consultation. Informal consultation is also international best practice, documented international best practice. That even before you now try to start doing formal appeal, you can also informally make an appeal. But every appeal must be made with documentary evidence. You must have evidence for your point, right? Like when it comes to tariff classification, for example, which is my own area of expertise, we always want to know that the economic operator has an in-depth understanding of the general interpretative rules, the legal framework, you understand, or the legal notes that guide classification in each section or chapter or heading of the tariff. Because this area is a place where most of the time economic operators want to classify based on fiscal policy measures, duty rates. But we have international obligations. Myself, as a fellow of the Harmonized System, I'm obligated to ensure that Nigeria Customs Service follows, under the Article 3 of the Harmonized System Convention, is what they call the obligation of contracting parties, that we apply the general interpretative rules appropriately at every time. And most of the time, I noticed that there is this gap because in the last couple of months, we had a sensitization program, across different zones. And there is this, what they call lacuna. There is so much misunderstanding of the tariff classification rules or how to perform or do tariff classification. So if you're going to make an appeal, whether it's formal or informal, it's always important to have your evidence based on legal framework, not based on your opinion, not based on what another country decided, because we are not obligated to follow the tariff decision of another country, right? That's another administration, and each administration has legal framework. And the legal framework that supersedes is national legislation, the Nigeria Customs Service Act, the fiscal policy measure as published by the Ministry of Finance for that year, and the monetary policy. And then we also have the common external tariff, the ECOWAS common external tariff. So our decisions when it comes to tariff classification are guided by these principles, not what was even the WCO classification opinion. We are not obligated to follow those opinions. It's a choice. I don't know if you get, because every administration has how do I put it? Fiscal policy supersedes everything. Because fiscal policy measure may make in the subheadings of the tariff, there is the headings and the subheadings. We might have provision on that subheading for a particular product, right? Our concept of maybe, for example, there was a decision to classify tempeh. Tempeh is a soya bean product. So I think the WCO decided, I can't remember the exact HS code, but they had a different classification opinion. But the ASEAN group wrote to the WCO and said, look, we want to maintain our position in the classification of tempeh. We will not follow the WCO opinion because our understanding as a region is different from, the understanding of the WCO. So it's very good to have an understanding of the fiscal policy measures. It's good to have this consultation and not just say, oh, no, Nigeria Customs is not trying to favor us. So when you are making an appeal, you have to be very, very well informed of all, these various obligations and provisions.
Thank you so much, madam. The last question for the day. If there are multiple items in one particular FOMM or let's say PFI, can it be taken at once or it can be taken separately?
Okay, so when you are applying for an advance ruling, the maximum products you can treat is 4. You can't take more than 4 products per application because the system will not accept it. The maximum products you can treat per advance ruling is 4 products. So yeah, we can't take multiple. Yeah, but take multiple applications for the different, but in batches of 4. It can't be more than 4 applications per time. So let me also allow Engineer Terang. I think he has some comments to make.
Sure. Please unmute.
Actually, I think we have discussed most of the important issues. Though important, we will never exhaust important issues in customs and in global trade. But this is a very good opportunity, and it's a starting point for us to keep on building on the knowledge sharing and on relationship management. And I believe we are rounding up. So I just want to say thank you to all the participants and the organizers, and at the same time look forward to a cordial working relationship, and also looking forward to very better networking between among us all. So thank you for your time, and thank you for all the
Thank you.
sacrifices to be here.
Thank you so much. I request the chairman, PMG Man, Supply Chains Manager Committee, Mr. Prince Nebudao, to come and do the vote of thanks for us, please.
Okay, sorry, before you do the vote of thanks, I think some people were requesting for slides. Well, these slides are our presentation slides, so we can't share these ones. But Mr. Kailash can let us know the number of people that were registered on this particular meeting, because we actually have handbook for economic operators, right? So that we can, is it share with you or send to you?
Sure.
Yeah, on some of the things that we have discussed. So I don't know if that's okay by you, because
Yeah,
these slides are
okay.
actually, our lecture slides, and it's not going to be that. What you need is we have a handbook for you. So you can just send us the total number of people that need these handbooks, and then we'll find who or how to dispatch to you, and then you can disseminate to the people
Sure,
that
ma'am. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay,
Thank
however,
you.
we can share, like Terence said, we can share the evaluation and the import procedures. So, but for the advanced trading, we
Sure,
have a handbook.
I have the email address of all the registered members, and what I'll do, I'll have a final slide from you as to be shared with all the participants. Then I can forward to all of them, and I'll share the list with you. Thank you.
Okay.
Prince, over
Thank
to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kailash, for anchoring this program. We want to sincerely appreciate our CSC, Loretta, and Abu for doing justice to the presentation. We are so grateful that we have this forum where we can exchange knowledge between the economic operators and the Nigerian custom. We thank you so much for your time. In fact, to everyone here present, thank you so much for this opportunity, for coming. Without you, this meeting would have been anything worth it. So thank you to everybody, and I hope you have a more productive day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure also. And I think, okay, so like rounding up, of course, we look forward to more engagement. And we didn't have time to cover the tariff classification and the customs valuation. So it's something that we actually want to cover, because these are the issues that cause trouble. So I don't know, maybe at a future date, of course, we will be in communication with Mr. Kailash. We also want to have this workshop on customs valuation and tariff classification.
Yes,
Even the AEO.
We'd like to organize this. We'd like to organize this, but maybe a face-to-face. So we need to fly you down to Lagos and put you in some good hotel. So before we can have this, and we wanted to have not online, this kind of those two important topics of classification and the valuation. So we'll take it face-to-face in venue will be decided soon, and we'll get back to you.
There's no problem.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Hereby we close this meeting. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you. Bye. Very, very.
Thank you, madam. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, Otumba, can you help me finish this meeting from your end?
Okay,
And,
okay.
and
Thank
for,
you.
And for all, yeah.
Yeah,
There is
take care.
a,
Take
the
care.
icon called leave, and then leave and for all.
They're just showing me end, so I'll